Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us and for being so prompt tonight. For those that don't know me, I'm James Lucas, the CEO and founder of Cirrus HQ, an AWS consulting partner based in Livingston. I'm also the founder of this user group that's been going a good number of years now, so thank you all very much for attending. It's a great talk tonight. I'm really looking forward to it from Mark. I'll let him introduce himself in more detail tonight, but on reversing the 80-20 rule in data preparation with AWS Glue DataBrew. So Mark and I were having a chat yesterday, and it's really good insights I think we'll be able to take away from tonight's talk, and it's given me ideas already. I've been peppering him with questions. So as you see by the screen that's up at the moment, if you do have any questions as we go along, there's a question section within GoToWebinar, so please ask your questions in there. And then as you go along or at the end, we'll give you time to ask questions at the end. And we'll go through that and we'll have a chat through with Mark at the end with any questions that you may have that brought up during the talk. So on that note, I will hand over to Mark and let him introduce himself in more detail.
All right. Thank you very much, James. So let me just share my screen here. Do I have presenter options? There we go. All right. Okay. I think we're set up.
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So, all right. Thank you, James, and thank you for inviting me to talk to the group this evening. I appreciate the invite. So, just by way of introduction, so my name is Mark Dobbie. I'm a solutions architect with AWS. I work with small and medium businesses across a wide variety of use cases. And my role is to guide these customers around architectural best practice and help ensure that they're getting the most benefit from our services. So what I'm going to talk to you about this evening is AWS Glue DataBrew. So this is a visual data preparation tool which we launched in November last year, just ahead of reInvent. And the purpose of Glue DataBrew is to make it easier for data analysts and data scientists to clean and normalize data in preparation for analytics, machine learning, and application development use cases. And to do this much more quickly than some of the often very manual processes that these teams use today. So in terms of the agenda, so we'll start by looking at some of the data integration challenges that we hear from companies and also some current data trends. Then we'll move on to introduce Glue DataBrew itself. I'll talk also around the key concepts within the tool. And then we'll do a walkthrough of DataBrew and we'll see how hopefully straightforward it is to work with and prepare data. Then I'll finish up with a run through of some popular use cases for Glue DataBrew, and then we'll have some time at the end for any Q&A. Okay, so let's kick off with some trends and challenges in data integration today. As I'm sure you're very familiar with, data volumes are increasing at an unprecedented rate. So exploding from terabytes to petabytes and sometimes exabytes of data. And traditional on-prem data analytics approaches can't handle these data volumes because they don't really scale well enough and are often too expensive. So we hear from companies all the time that they're looking to extract more value from the data, but struggle to capture and store and analyze all the data generated by their businesses. So data is growing exponentially. It's coming from new sources. It's increasingly diverse. It's structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. And it needs to be securely accessed and analyzed by people with diverse skill sets, and also any number of applications. So part of that struggle that we hear from these companies is that their teams spend a lot of time on these undifferentiated, repetitive, and mundane tasks associated with preparing the data for analytics and machine learning workloads. So data preparation is a multi-step process, and you need the right tools for the right job. But in addition to that, traditional approaches can also be very expensive. So multiple teams of analysts, for example, finance analysts or marketing analysts, could well be working in their own silo. So each have their own set of preferred tools, requiring their own set of user licenses. And to work with the data they need, that data often gets copied and moved around the corporate network and file shares, or even outside the corporate network, which raises security concerns. So data also is often sitting in spreadsheets, and there's lots of manual steps to prepare the data. It needs a lot of code-based heavy lifting to make it work at scale. Then there's more and more data. So this structured and unstructured and data from logs. It's becoming important to have ad hoc cleaning as part of the data preparation process, but often this is done without any reuse of existing code assets, the same data problems on the same data sets being solved multiple times across multiple different teams. So as much as 80% of time is spent preparing data today. And this is a statement we often hear quoted from various studies as the 80-20 rule. And what it's referring to is that data scientists and data analysts spend up to 80% of the time preparing data and only 20% deriving insights and getting value from that data. And there are several roles and personas doing data preparation within an organization. And data preparation means different things to these different roles and personas. So if I'm a data engineer or ETL developer, I probably have a very schema-centric view of the data. I'll have SQL skills and Python and Scala skills. I'll be comfortable using code-based environments. I'm writing custom workflows and custom code to pull data from different data sources and then pivot and transform and slice and dice the data before working with data analysts and data scientists to identify what needs to be fixed in the data. Then after I've figured all this out, and assuming that this is a repetitive process, so for example, ingesting weekly sales data, then I'll need to schedule a custom workflow on an ongoing basis so incoming data can automatically be transformed. Now, if I'm a data analyst, data scientist, then I have more of a data-centric view. I may have some SQL skills, I might have some basic Python skills, but my core skill is not coding. And my expertise is the data domain. I'm familiar with the data and its meaning. I want to touch and feel and visualize the data. So I'll probably work closely with the data engineers, ETL developers, to figure out the kind of transformations required. So this is all a fairly elaborate process. If the data analyst finds something wrong with the data, then we have to iterate through this process again. So re-involving the data engineer, maybe adding new transformations, verifying those changes, reorchestrating the workflow. And this iterative process can take days or even weeks to complete. So to better support these different roles, what we need to consider is that they each have the right tool for the right persona or job. So looking more broadly across the AWS analytics stack, these themes of the right tool for the right job and the traditional issues of time consumption, manual effort and cost are ones that we're helping to solve for data engineers, data scientists and business analysts at all layers. So there's deep integration between all the layers of the stack, and that gives builders the tools to quickly analyze data using any approach. And at the heart of this, it could be your data lake. And with AWS, you can use AWS Lake Formation to store your data in S3 and then analyze that data using the right tool for the job. So whether that's Redshift for data warehouse, EMR, Glue, Athena for running SQL queries across data in S3, OpenSearch service for operational analytics, Kinesis for streaming data. And then at the top layer, we have services such as Quicksight for business reports, visualization, interactive dashboards, Pinpoint for customer engagement, and so on. So just to summarize, with our stack of native and fully integrated services, there's no need to continually move and transform data. So just focusing back into Glue and Glue DataBrew. So where does Glue DataBrew sit alongside the other Glue services that you might already be aware of? And a common question is, when would I use Glue Studio and when would I use Glue DataBrew? So let's take AWS Glue Studio. So it's a visual IDE for ETL. It's targeted more towards data engineers, and its role is to make it easy to create, run, and monitor ETL jobs in AWS Glue. So with Glue Studio, I can visually compose data transformation workflows, and from that, generate PySpark code, which I can then run and monitor through Glue Studio. And when I run it, it's running on AWS Glue's Apache Spark-based serverless ETL engine. If I want to develop complex data transformations, then I can edit and extend the code generated by Glue Studio. If I want to work with streaming data use cases, then I can also use Glue Studio to develop streaming jobs visually, to run on Glue as a streaming ETL job, consume data from streaming sources like Kinesis data streams and Amazon managed streaming for Kafka. Now, with Glue DataBrew, it's a no-code data preparation tool, and it's aimed at data analysts and data scientists, and as such provides a much larger library of pre-built transformations. So just to complete the picture, Glue Elastic Views, I'll mention this briefly. It makes it easy to build materialized views using SQL, and it combines and it replicates data across multiple data stores without having to write any code. So Glue Elastic Views, it's in a preview at the moment with our services. Okay, let's step into Glue DataBrew itself. So as I mentioned, DataBrew is a visual data preparation tool, and it removes the technical barriers for data analysts and data scientists to clean or normalize data. And it provides these users with capabilities to explore and enrich, clean and normalize data, all without the need for code through this interactive point-and-click visual interface. DataBrew enables data analysts and data scientists to self-serve data preparation tasks that they come across in the work. So rather than be dependent on data engineers or ETL developers who might be a resource bottleneck within an organization. And these tasks can be working with terabytes or petabytes of data directly from their S3 data lake, the data warehouse, or a database such as Amazon Aurora or Amazon RDS. But it also could be as simple as uploading an Excel file from the local disk into DataBrew. And this is also a very common use case that we see. The DataBrew UI can be accessed through the AWS Management Console. But there are also plugins for Jupyter Notebooks and SageMaker Studio, so you can surface the DataBrew UI within your notebook environment as well. So I've already touched on some of the functionality already, but just running through this slide. So connecting to data sources, so as well as the ones that I've already mentioned, such as S3, relational databases, Redshift clusters, you can also connect to your Glue data catalog, to AWS Data Exchange. So Data Exchange is where you can subscribe to hundreds of both free and commercial third-party data providers such as Dun & Bradstreet and Reuters. There's also integration with Amazon AppFlow, so you can access your data from external services such as Salesforce or Marketo directly into DataBrew. And then in terms of transformation, so once you have your data loaded in, you can apply more than 250 built-in transformations like join, split, merge, pivot, and many more. DataBrew also recommends data cleaning and normalization steps. So, for example, filtering anomalies, normalizing data to standard date and time values, and correcting duplicated data. There's also a set of transformations for data science. So, for example, there's a natural language processing transformation for word stemming. So converting a word such as yearly to a common or base word such as root. Such as year. So a kind of root word such as year. There's also ML transformations for binning, one-hot encoding, and category mapping, and more. So DataBrew is built for users of all technical levels. All these transformations are delivered using a very easy to use UI, and we'll see that in the demo shortly. And all your transformations that you apply to your data set are saved as a DataBrew recipe without having to write a single line of code. And these recipes can be versioned and reused across your department or organization. Advanced data profiling. So Glue DataBrew also helps you understand your data by running a data profile job that collects detailed statistics on your data. And these stats are both a data set level and a column level. And again, we'll see some of this during the demo shortly as well. DataBrew also keeps track of lineage and provides the ability to see various stages of the transformation from start to finish. And there's a lot of operations and transformations that you can do on the data. So this ability to understand what's been changed, when it was changed by who, is important for each data set. Integrating with data pipelines. So like other AWS services, you can access and integrate Glue DataBrew with your existing pipeline. And you can do that using the SDK or the API. Now, DataBrew operates at a massive scale in a serverless capacity. You pay for what you use when you use it. You don't need to worry about server provisioning or maintenance. All of that is handled by the DataBrew service for you. And then just the last element on this slide, advanced use cases. So I've already mentioned this, but Glue DataBrew serves many use cases and many personas. So not only the data preparation transformation for analytics pipelines, but transformations for advanced machine learning use cases as well. Okay, so in terms of how DataBrew works, so going from left to right on this diagram, on the left is how you connect to your data. And from connecting to your data, you're going to create a data set, and this is the first step in the process. And whether that's local files from your computer or connecting to your Redshift cluster or one of the other data source options. Then the second step, you're going to be taken into this visual project interface. So in here, you can see your data. You can start doing things with your data. So for example, DataBrew tells me there are null values in my data. I want to remove these or replace them with something else. Maybe I want to convert dates to a consistent format, or I want to perform one-hot encoding on a column in preparation for ML model training. And each of these transformations that you apply is a step, and all the steps together make up a recipe. And then once you have your recipe, you configure and run a job around your recipe. And as part of this job configuration, you'll specify an output location, such as S3 or Redshift or another JDBC compliant database. So if you're writing to S3, then you can configure the output file format, so Parquet, for example. You can also configure file compression and identify columns for DataBrew to partition the data on. Then after your job is run, your data is then ready for however you need to use it next, whether that's to import into Quicksight for reporting or for training an ML model, or maybe for some other purpose. Okay, so I'm going to run through a demo of DataBrew, and the demo is based on our publicly accessible Glue DataBrew workshop. So if you want to try it out for yourself afterwards, then you can find it at this URL, databrew.workshop.aws. So before I jump into demo, let me just kind of introduce it a little bit and the scenario behind it. So the scenario is based on an online pet shop. They've recently launched a new product line for pets. They were expecting it to be a great success, but sales from regions from some of the regions have been below expectation. So marketing research suggests that limited awareness around the product in these regions is the main reason for poor sales. So to address this problem, the company wants to start a targeted mail campaign in those regions to increase awareness and product sales. The team needs a fast turnaround. They don't have much time to write code and manage infrastructure. And it's my job to analyze and transform this customer product and sales data to identify zip codes where specific product types need to be marketed. So this is our simple target architecture. So S3 for our data store, our data source, then using DataBrew for the transformation, and then using Quicksight to visualize and report the results. And in this demo, we'll focus on the top path around total sales data. Okay, so let me just switch screens here. And what I'll also do is I'll stop my camera just so we've got kind of maximum screen space for the web browser. So I'm just going to bring this up in a second, let it load. Okay, so one of the first things to notice is that Glue DataBrew actually sits out with the other AWS Glue services, and that's intentional because it is targeted at a slightly different job role and job persona, so it's kind of more data analyst focused. So I'm going to click into Glue DataBrew here. Okay, and what you'll notice down the left here are kind of core concepts within DataBrew. So data sets is where I'm going to be starting the process. I'm then going to create a project for my data set, and then with my project, I'm going to create a recipe, and then once I've completed my recipe, then I'm going to run a job to transform all of that data. Okay, so I'm going to start by creating a data set for my customer data. So I'm just going to give this customer data set a name. And then for me, this data is living in S3. So I have it sitting in my customers folder. And I'm going to select this file. This is a kind of fairly static example. I'm just picking a specific file. I can also create dynamic data sets as well. So if I want to pick, say, files that have been dropped into that bucket in the last 24 hours or the last or latest, X number of files, then I can do that too. I can also see all the different data source options listed here that DataBrew provides. And then in terms of configurations, I can see the different file types that I can import from S3. So for me, this is going to be a CSV file. And then my file has a header row as the first row, so I can click to continue and create this data set. Okay, so that's the data set established. And now what I need to do is create a project with this data set. I'm going to call it cleaned customer project. So I'm going to use this project to clean up the customer data and prepare it for analysis. Now, as part of this project, I'm going to create a new recipe. I can also use existing recipes or import from maybe recipes that have been created in the past. But for this project, it's going to be a new recipe. My data set's already been selected. I can then choose to how much data I want to sample within the UI. So there's some different options here. So I'm going to choose the first 500 rows of my data set to sample. I then need to give the project some permissions so it can access that data within S3. So I already have an IAM role created, but I could also just let DataBrew create one for me. Okay, now it's going to take just 1 or 2 minutes just to establish that project environment. So it's going to provision the compute underneath. It's then going to load that sample data into the UI. But some things just to call out while we're waiting on that to happen. So along the top here of the UI, you can see in this toolbar many of the transformations that are available. There's also transformations that I can navigate into at a column level that we'll see in a minute too. And then over on this right-hand side, this is my recipe area. So as I start to add transformations to the project, then these will be listed in this area. I can click to preview each transformation before I apply it, and I can also edit and delete those transformations. So hopefully the rocket ship will be launched very soon, and we'll see this data coming through into the UI. Okay, so there we go. So my project environment has been created. So I now have this interactive session where I can start to work with my data. So the data set's pretty simple. I've got some customer name information here, gender, date of birth, and address. Now the first thing I want to do, I have all these, the name broken across multiple fields. For one of my downstream marketing systems, that needs to be merged into a single field. So I'm going to click on to merge here. I'm going to click to on the name prefix, the first name and the last name. I'm going to set up a space separator for the different fields, and I'm going to give this column a name. So let's call it customer name. Now I can click to preview the changes. And then if I'm happy with what I see, then I can click to apply the changes. Okay, so that's step 1 of my data preparation. Looking at the date of birth, it looks like it's in a format just now where it's not a consistent length. So I'm going to reformat these dates of birth. So I'm going to go into the format section, date time formats, and I want to give it a consistent date length. So I'm going to choose this US format here. Okay, I can click to apply this previous change. I'm just going to click straight through to apply that change. Okay, so that's done. the last piece I want to do is do a bit of work on this address data, because for my use case, I'm trying to analyze based on zip code. So I'm going to split out the address data, do a bit of cleanup on it, and then identify the zip code. So I'm going to select this address field and click to split. Actually, the first thing we do before I do that, I'm going to clean it first. So let me just click on to clean, because I've noticed it's got some special characters in there that I want to remove. So I'm just going to enter those in here. I'm going to click apply. Okay, it looks a little bit cleaner. And I'm going to click to split this field out. I'm going to split it on the semicolon delimiter in here. The address is split into 5 sections, and there's 4 semicolon delimiters. So I'm going to split this 4 times. I'm going to click to apply that. Okay. So if I navigate along here, I can see my zip code has now been broken out. So I'm just going to rename that field just so I don't lose track of which address field it is in the data. Okay, so those are all the transformations I want to apply. The data looks like it's in much better shape now. Now I've seen how it looks in the preview, but now I want to create a job to run that across the whole data set. So I'm going to click to create a job here. Let's give the job a name, and then I need to specify an output for this job. So I can choose from any of the available outputs. I'm going to write it back into my data lake. I'm going to leave the file type as CSV, the delimiter as comma. I'm not going to apply any compression to my file at this point in time. So I'm just going to pick my bucket to write it out to. I'm going to drop it into my shared folder, so potentially other analysts can pick up that data. If I want to, I can also control the amount of compute capacity that DataBrew can use to run this job. So it has a default of 5 DataBrew nodes. I can increase that maybe if I'm running a very large data set, but I'm going to stick with that for now. I can also associate a schedule. So if I want to make this a recurring task, then I can define a schedule as well for that data. And again, just the last step, I'm going to assign some permissions so that the job can access S3. So I'm going to create and run that job. Okay, so that job is now running. If I go into my job views, I can see that clean customer job is running, and that will probably take just a couple of minutes just to run through. So the other parts of my data set that I need to do some work with are the sales data and the product data as well. So let's start with sales. So sales data, I don't always trust the sales data that comes from this company. It may have some missing values. So what I'm going to do with that data, I'm going to run a data profile job on it. And I'm going to run that across the full data set. And then I'm going to just click to run that job. Okay, that's the second type of job that's available within DataBrew. I have the recipe job that we've got running on the customer data and the profile job that's running on the sales data. Now, rather than wait for that job to complete, here's one I ran earlier. So let's have a quick look at what's in the data profile. So at a data set level, I can see some data set wide statistics, just some high level information. It can give me an indication as to whether there's missing cells in the data set, duplicate rows. I can also see correlations between the numeric columns within that data. I can also see distribution statistics as well across the numerical values. So if we're going to look at the column statistics, then I get a bit more detail here. So for example, if we look at the product ID. I can start to see data around cardinality. Are there outliers in the data? Are there any missing values? I can also see things such as the value distribution, so it's maybe not so applicable for this field, and the top distinct values down here. So if this was product names, then that would probably make a little bit more sense. Okay, so let's just check back on our job status. So our cleaned customer job has now finished. So what I'm going to start to do now, I'm going to join my customer data, my sales data, and my product data. So let's go back into the data sets. Now, I've had a look at the data profile for the sales data. I'm happy enough, it doesn't look too bad. So I'm going to continue on and create a new project with this. So I'm going to give the project a name. Again, I'm going to stick with all the default settings. I have the right data set enabled. I'm going to choose my permissions again. I'm going to click to create my sales project. So again, that's just going to take 1 or 2 minutes just to start up. So just to explain what we're going to do within this project. So we're going to join the customer data to the sales data and also the product data as well. And then we're going to do a little bit of aggregation on the data so we can start to kind of sum up some of the total sales for that data in preparation for my analysis a little bit later. So we'll just let that run for hopefully another minute or so. The rocket's busy taking off again. Okay, so there we go. So let me quickly go into the join. Now what I want to do, I want to use the cleaned customer data. So I'm going to use the output from that customer job that we ran earlier, cleaned customer data. I'm going to pick the shared folder that I wrote that out to. I'm going to click my cleaned customer data and select the CSV file. I'm going to keep everything else as default and click to create that new data set. I can then see a preview of it, and now I'm going to go through and specify the join details on that. I'm going to specify in a join, I want to join the customer ID on the sales data with the customer ID on the clean customer data. And actually, all I'm really interested from the customer data is the zip code. So let me just get rid of all those other columns, fields. Okay, so we have our zip code data in here. And let me just change the type of that to be an integer as well, because that will help with my analysis. I'm now going to join also with the product data. And we can see a preview of the product data. I'm going to join again, this time on product ID of the sales data with the product key of the product data. And this time with the product data, I'm only really interested in the product type. So I'm going to get rid of everything else and just keep this nice and simple. Okay. Now I know that for my analysis as well that I want to compare the old products with the new products. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a conditional transform in here too. So I'm going to select my product ID and create a new column conditionally on the value of the product ID. So what I'm going to say is that I know that where the product ID is 11 or less, that's an old product. Where the product ID is greater than 11, that's a new product. So I'm going to say if it's less than or equal to 11, then flag the value as old. Otherwise, if the product ID is greater than 11, I'm going to flag that as new. I'm going to call this new column product status. Okay, so we now have our product status column. I'm going to get rid of some of these columns as well. So I don't need my date. I don't need the customer ID. I'm not really interested in the quantity. I'm only really interested in the total sales. So I'm going to keep everything else. Get rid of those columns. And now I'm going to start to do some aggregation on my data set here. So I'm interested in the total sales by product. So let's put some group bys in here. And then we're going to do a sum aggregation on the total sales. Okay, so that's the data that I want to then do my analysis with. Okay, so I'm finished with that now. I'm happy with the data. I'm going to create another job. I'm going to write that back out into my S3 bucket. I'm going to leave everything else as default again. Oh, I need to select my permissions. I'm going to click to create and run that job. Okay, so that's probably going to take a few minutes to run, but I already have some results I prepared earlier. So what I can then do with that data once that job's complete is start to work with that in Quicksight and build a business report and visualize that data. So I'm not going to spend too long in Quicksight because it's worthy of another talk in itself. But what I can do within Quicksight, I can create a data set now and link that data into Quicksight. And within Quicksight, there's a lot of different data sources I can choose from. In my case, it's going to be S3 as the data source. Now I already have my data source pre-prepared. I set this up a little bit earlier. So I have my output from my sales job that's running in DataBrew. And then I can start to do some analysis on that data. So I also have some pre-built analysis here. So rather than step through the process of showing you how to build a dashboard in Quicksight this evening. So these are the fields, the data fields that were produced by the DataBrew job. I've pulled the data into Quicksight and I can start to build visualizations within Quicksight. So just to show you, in this one here, I have I'm displaying the total sales by product type and product status. So I can see, for example, that the old exercise pens are way outselling the new exercise pens. I can also start to do look at the data on a map, so I can see visually which postcodes, in this case Atlanta, is the data, are the products selling well in. I've got new products in this left map where I can compare with total sales of all products by zip code in this map on the right. And if I want a more numerical view of the data, then I can also set up a pivot table here as well. And from that, I can publish that report and let business stakeholders start to review that data. Okay, so that's the end of the demo. So hopefully that was useful, gave you a little bit of a tour of some of the capabilities in DataBrew and also just briefly in Quicksight. So let me just step back of just a few more slides in the presentation. So just pop my camera back on as well. So just to kind of wrap up with some popular use cases for DataBrew. So this is really what you built out in a demo, this kind of one-time analysis for business reporting. So ad hoc data prep, and it's very typical in analyst teams or BI teams. You get a data set, you want to really understand what's in it, maybe have some monthly sales data. So that could be sitting in a file on your local computer or in S3 or Redshift. And then once you have your data set within DataBrew, you can then clean it, prepare it, normalize it, output it back to S3, and from there you could import it into Amazon Quicksight for reporting and visualization. So this ad hoc use case that we've seen is probably the most fundamental flow within DataBrew. Now, once you've thought about the data transformations you want to create, then another flow to look at is understanding the quality of your data. So as you've seen, when you have your data set within DataBrew, you can profile it. It will generate over 40 data quality statistics, and you can access that visually through DataBrew. Now that kind of takes you part of the way. If you want to be a little bit more advanced, then maybe you want to act on those statistics. So they're written out to a JSON file within your S3 bucket. From there, you could build out a set of business rules. Say, for example, the cardinality for a specific column shouldn't drop below 90%. Then you can implement those business rules within AWS Lambda in a Lambda function. Now, when that profile job finishes, EventBridge will receive an event from Glue DataBrew when that job is completed, and then you can use that event notification to trigger the Lambda function to look at that profile JSON file. If your business rules have failed, then you probably want to stop any further processing in your pipeline. So instead, you might want to trigger an email notification alerting a user and allow them to manually intervene and review that data. And then we've touched on machine learning. So using DataBrew for machine learning use cases. So you can use the feature engineering capabilities within DataBrew to prepare a data set for model training. So whatever experience that you've seen with DataBrew this evening in the management console, you can actually also load that as a plugin within your Jupyter environment. So with the plugin installed within that Jupyter environment, and that could be a self-managed EC2 environment or within SageMaker Studio, you can upload the dataset, clean and normalize, then train and publish your ML model without the need to leave your Jupyter environment to use DataBrew. And then the final use case to call out, so we've seen the ad hoc use case at the start. But really, operating at scale, if you have incoming data on a recurring basis, maybe a weekly data feed comes in or daily sales records, then you can orchestrate that very easily within DataBrew. You can schedule jobs to say run every hour, every week. You can also do that through the API or SDK. So if you're looking to orchestrate at scale, you can leverage the integration with step functions to trigger your DataBrew job. And then once that data is prepared, it goes back into S3, and often customers prefer to run a Glue crawler again over that. And then you can look to use Glue to load that transformed data back into Redshift for further querying. So that enables your data scientists and data analysts to do data preparation at scale. So that was everything. That was all the use cases I wanted to cover. Hopefully that's been useful to you. So I'm going to kind of hand it back over now and open it up for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think that was incredibly interesting, and it shows the power of the systems. I mean, as you say, the old days you might have spent days working with spreadsheets trying to put some of this together, and the difference it kind of makes in this is just incredible. So we do have a list of questions I can already ask you. So some quite straightforward, some a bit more complicated. So we'll see how we get on, and some may have been touched on slightly because a number of them came in quite early, but we'll see how we get on. But there's a chance still for everyone else that hasn't asked a question yet, if they are sitting there thinking something, please still put your questions in, and hopefully we'll be able to get through them all. So in no particular order, can I include Glue DataBrew as part of a pipeline with some output from Glue Studio?
So I mean, you can interface with DataBrew via the APIs and SDK. So if that's something that you're able to use to trigger as part of your pipeline, then that would be the way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know whether that answers the question.
They can passing a message in and tell me is that one of the problems with this kind of system. But it's another one. I believe SageMaker Data Wrangler is also a data preparation tool that AWS have released. When should I use Glue DataBrew, and when should I use SageMaker Data Wrangler?
Yeah, so that comes up quite often. So I mean, they're definitely kind of very similar. There's a lot of overlap between Glue DataBrew and SageMaker Data Wrangler. So what I say is, if you're already using, say, SageMaker Studio, and most of your data preparation activities are relating to preparing data from models in SageMaker, then use SageMaker Data Wrangler. But if you need to do data preparation for data pipelines and machine learning in a variety of frameworks, then also if you have the need to operate on very large data sets and need a serverless solution, then use Glue DataBrew. And it's worth looking at the requirements for each. So to use Data Wrangler, you need access to an EC2 instance. It needs to be an M5, 4x large. So whereas Glue DataBrew is serverless, so it's managing the infrastructure for you.
Thank you, which goes on to a kind of related question from one of the audience. Is the underlying compute only used while doing transformations, or is it active while a project is created? So I'm assuming that's probably a cost-related question of, am I inadvertently going to leave something running?
Yeah, sure. So with Glue DataBrew, you won't inadvertently leave something running. So there's the charges are kind of fall into two areas. One is there's a charge for the interactive session. So when you're using that project UI, and you're charged for each 30-minute session. Now, actually, the first, if you want to try out DataBrew, the first 40 interactive sessions are free for first-time users of DataBrew. And then the other part is a charge for running the DataBrew job. So that's a per DataBrew node hour charge, and that's prorated on a 1 minute billing duration. So where you can configure the number of nodes you want to allocate to your DataBrew job, then obviously that can increase the cost, but you're trading that off with maybe running that job a little bit quicker.
Great. And so yeah, when the job's done, you don't know your costs in terms of actually only running your costs from that perspective if you're actually running a job at the time. So
exactly, yeah. Once that job's complete, DataBrew is you're only paying for what you use when you use it. So DataBrew will manage that kind of serverless underlying infrastructure.
Great, thank you. Can recipes be copied and split into smaller steps for use in different data sets where you might not need all steps?
So can you use parts of recipes? Was that the question?
Yeah, I think it's another way of probably phrasing it. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a capability to import existing recipes and use some of the steps from those recipes. So yeah, that's so you can build kind of recipe modules. I guess would be one way to look at it, and start to incorporate those into new recipes.
Thank you. Bit of a longer one here, so bear with me and I'll repeat, or I'll send the whole question to you privately if that's easier. Was doing some prototyping work with DataBrew last month for some emerging customer needs. Is it possible for created recipes for data manipulation that they could be imported into Glue and used in custom transforms as part of workflows triggered by EventBridge? Given that recipe, I mean, I think this is all one question, but it may be answered in multiple parts.
Mm-hmm.
Given the recipes can only be downloaded as YAML or JSON, is there a way to generate Squawk.sql from these exported recipes as a way of sharing knowledge obtained in data prep for use in ETL development, or is the gap between Glue and DataBrew too wide to make exporting and importing viable?
Yeah, so you wouldn't be able to import that exported job from DataBrew into Glue. It is separate from that perspective. So DataBrew is very much targeting that no code use case. So yeah, if you I mean, that's where one of the differences as well with a kind of SageMaker data wrangler. So it has some coding options, so you can write kind of custom transformations as part of the job there. But certainly from Glue DataBrew, it's targeting data analysts and it's view as a no code solution.
Okay, thank you very much. Talking about data analysts and the thing about having teams of people, how can other users in my business discover which data sets I've transformed with DataBrew?
So you can, I mean, you can manage it through IAM permissions within DataBrew. So that could be, say at a recipe level, or at a kind of at a job level as well, on a project level. So I probably need to think a little bit more around that, but certainly maybe the place to start looking at that is the tagging options that you might have seen kind of whizzed by in the demo. But you can tag various jobs and recipes and data sets, and then you could build some permissions around those tags.
Great, thank you. I think we've only got a couple more questions at the moment. I'm just checking down them. You did a great example of formatting kind of dates, and if you're getting different month, the zeros included, not included, and you see the benefit of things like that. How do you manage data that comes in with different formats? I'm assuming it's very similar. So for date of birth, for example, you're getting some in US format, but other in, say, ISO format. Is that almost as simple, or is that do you have to have kind of multiple things put together and then generally putting them together afterwards?
Yeah, it's a good question. I probably need to kind of sit and kind of work through that example. I mean, it's possible you might choose multiple transformations to do that. I would need to look and see if something like some of the conditional rules could allow you to, check to see, or check the format, and then kind of, split one format out into one column and a different format into a different column. But yeah, maybe I'm kind of happy to kind of dig into that in a bit more detail if they want to connect with me directly.
Absolutely. I think that's linked to another question, will be the last one. Can the output of one DataBrew pipeline be used as the input for another? So that's kind of what you would do in that possible
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So that's what where we kind of set up that first kind of customer cleaning job. Then the output of that went into our shared folder in the S3 bucket, and then I created another data set from that output, and then we used that as we prepared the total sales data. Now that was obviously I was kind of stepping through that in an ad hoc way, but once that's set up, then it could become, you could schedule that within DataBrew for kind of recurring processes. So you could have that customer data job run first, and then you could schedule the total sales data run to run a little bit later.
So when you say about scheduling, is that inbuilt in DataBrew? Because that earlier mention of EventBridge is, I take it you could also, given you could SDK everything together, you could also get things like EventBridge to automatically schedule these things to run.
Yeah, so you have both options. So with there's built-in scheduling into the DataBrew UI. So you can schedule it directly in there, or maybe if you're tying it into more a kind of a kind of more complex pipeline, if you want to use step functions, then that's where you might look to use the APIs and the SDK.
Thank you. That's all the questions I've got at the moment. I think I've given you quite a grilling there in terms of detailed questions. So thank you very much for that. It's just coming up to 7:10, so that's roughly where we aim to finish the user group anyway. So thank you very much for coming, Mark. It's been really interesting even for me. I hope everyone else has enjoyed it. It certainly seems to be the case. So with that, we will say goodbye. For everyone here, please keep an eye on the meetup group for the details of the next one that comes along, and we'll hopefully see you then. Thank you very much, Mark.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.